When it comes to getting something done, there are very few things more important than unity. When it comes to sports, for example, it's the teams that play together that are unified for a common goal that usually win championships. And we typically think of unity as a good thing, and it usually is and often is. But in this video, we're going to take a look at a passage, a very familiar passage in Genesis chapter 11, the first 9 verses, the account of the Tower of Babel. And in this case, we're going to look at a negative side of unity. In verse 1, again, Genesis chapter 11, verse 1, it says, "Now the whole earth had one language and one speech." You know, as I've often thought of this, every time I've read this passage, I've often thought how nice that would be. When you hear somebody speaking a different language, just yesterday, in fact, I was out and heard someone speaking a language I didn't understand, don't even know what language they were speaking. And I just thought, I wonder what they're saying. It'd be nice if you had the ability to communicate. But just imagine at this point, the whole earth had one language and one speech. It says in verse 2, "And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there." We don't know exactly where the Tower of Babel was located, but we do know where this plain in the land of Shinar was located. It was a fertile valley that was watered by the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers, and so it would have made a good central location. I'm sure that's why they chose it. It says in verse 3, "Then they said to one another, 'Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly.' They had brick for stone, and they had asphalt for mortar." You know, the language here is very descriptive in terms of this was a pretty sophisticated process that they had. And the word that's translated in some Bibles slime here is bitumen. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's a mineral pitch that once it was hardened, it made a very strong cement. And actually, it's very commonly used even today in Assyria. And so they're using this very, again, sophisticated process to make these bricks. And verse 4 says, "And they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth.'" Now, in and of itself, there wouldn't be anything wrong with building a building or even a tower. But in this verse, verse 4, it indicates that it's a prideful thing. They're trying to make a name for themselves. There's no indication that God is part of the equation in the planning process. And they're going to build this city with a tower that reaches into the heavens. And so, again, we're given an indication here. It's a very prideful thing that they're going to try to accomplish. Verse 5 says, "But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built." As they're building this tower, God comes down sort of like a building inspector to see the process here, or the progress that they're making. And you would almost expect, because the goal is to make a tower that reaches the heaven, that God would come down and it would just be sort of a comical thing. They're trying to do something that they can't accomplish. But that's not at all what God says in verse 6. "And the Lord said, 'Indeed, the people are one, and they all have one language. And this is what they begin to do. Now nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them.'" Again, we see the importance of unity here. And even though it's, in this case, a negative thing, they all have one language. They're unified. They're together in what they want to accomplish. And as God says, there's nothing that they can't do. And so in verse 7, it says, "Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." We have a hint here of the Trinity. It says, "Come, let us," and the Trinity, if you're not familiar with that, it's God is Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and I believe that personally. We see passages that deal with the Trinity in the Old and New Testament. But again, God is going to halt the building process because they're unified, they're together, they speak one language, and as again, verse 6 says, there's nothing that will be withheld from them. There's nothing they can't accomplish since they are unified. And so God is going to confuse the language so they don't understand each other. Verse 8 says, "So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they ceased building the city." As soon as they could no longer communicate with each other, the building project stopped because, again, they're no longer unified because they can't understand one another. Very interesting passage. In verse 9, it says, "Therefore its name is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of all the earth." The word Babel means confusion. Once they could no longer communicate to the point where they could understand each other in this building process, the building stopped. We still see the effects, even today, of the confusion of languages in the world. As I said, just yesterday, I heard someone speaking a language that I didn't understand. And who knows what they were saying, and they were probably hearing me talk and thought, I don't know what that guy's saying either. But the variety of languages we see in the world and the multiple languages that we see in the world really makes it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to hold a conversation with people and communicate, let alone get anything accomplished. So again, this is an interesting passage. It's a pretty simple, straightforward passage, but it shows us where the languages came from a biblical point of view. Thanks for visiting The Essential Truth. If you would, please like this video, give it a thumbs up. Also share it with someone that you think would be encouraged or blessed by it, and subscribe to the channel. All of those things are very helpful. I do videos like this where we look at passages verse by verse, a little more in depth, and I also, on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, do short videos that are just Bible verses of the day to be an encouragement and a blessing. And so again, thank you for visiting The Essential Truth. This is Pastor Dave. You have a blessed day.